"Mummy, someone's crying in the wall." The words came out of nowhere, in a hushed voice that somehow cut through the still morning air. Aubrey stopped mid-step and turned around, blinking at her son. 4-year-old Liam stood still, one hand outstretched, the other pressed to the crumbling concrete wall of the abandoned warehouse. His ear was pressed against it like he was listening for the ocean. Aubrey frowned. "What did you say, sweetheart?" Liam turned to her, his face pale, brows drawn together in a seriousness far beyond his years. "Someone's in there, crying." At first she almost laughed, not unkindly, just the way any parent does when their kid's imagination kicks in during an overgrown nature walk that's wandered a little too far off trail. But something in Liam's eyes made her stop. He wasn't playing. He wasn't pretending. And Liam never made things up. Ever. She stepped closer, brushing a vine aside as her sneakers scraped against cracked pavement. "Liam, this place isn't safe. We shouldn't be here. Come on, let's—" And then she heard it. A whimper, faint, muffled, raw, not the wind, not the echo of some bird, a real sound. Alive. Aubrey froze, heart thudding. The wall was discolored in this section, a patch of newer concrete that didn't quite match the rest. Lighter, uneven, like someone had rushed a repair job and didn't care to blend it. Her breath caught. "Step back, honey," she said quietly. Liam obeyed without question. That alone scared her more than anything. Aubrey crouched, placing her ear against the cool cement. For a moment, silence. Then, another whimper, this time followed by a faint scraping, like nails against wood or something trying to move. Her stomach twisted. She pulled out her phone and turned on the flashlight. The beam flicked across the rough surface. At the base of the wall, just above the cracked foundation, the concrete had thinned slightly. A section had flaked away, revealing the older layer beneath. She touched it, brittle at the edges. There was a thin crack, just big enough to wedge in a screwdriver. "What is it?" Liam whispered. "I don't know," she answered. "But it's alive." Something sharp and sour coated the air now. Decay, wet fur, fear. "Is it a person?" Liam asked, inching forward. She shook her head. Number not a person. She rummaged through her backpack. Habit after being a single mum for years, she always carried too much, and found a small multi-tool. It had a screwdriver, a dull blade, a miniature hammer that had once helped her fix a broken cabinet door. Maybe it could help her now. Aubrey jammed the flathead screwdriver into the crack and began chipping away. The cement flaked off easier than she expected. Within moments, a thin hole opened behind the patch. Liam crouched beside her, eyes wide. Then it happened. A breath, hot, desperate, and an eye. Just one. Staring at her. Bloodshot, clouded with pain, but still glowing with something she couldn't name. A dog. A German shepherd. Buried. Inside the wall. "Oh my God!" she breathed. The animal didn't bark, didn't growl, just stared. Silent and shaking. The muzzle was barely visible, its nose coated with dust and dried blood. She could see that only its face was free, the rest was inside the wall. Aubrey staggered back. Her heart pounded so loud she could hear it in her ears. "They put him in there," she whispered. "Someone cemented him in." Liam reached out slowly, his fingers brushing the dog's fur through the tiny gap. The shepherd flinched, but didn't pull away. "He's scared," Liam said quietly. "But he knows we're here now." Aubrey looked at him. Her son wasn't scared. He was calm, focused, like he understood something she didn't. "Liam," she said slowly, "how do you know that?" "I can feel it," he said, still watching the dog. "He's trying to talk, but he can't." Aubrey opened her mouth, closed it. She didn't know what scared her more, The dog in the wall or the certainty in her son's voice. She called 911. The dispatcher said animal control and emergency services were delayed due to a highway pileup. It might take over an hour. Aubrey hung up and stared at the wall again. The dog's breathing was getting weaker. "We don't have an hour," Liam said, as if reading her thoughts. Aubrey's hands were already blistered from the concrete shards, but she picked up the multi-tool again. "Move back," she said. "I'm getting you out." She began hammering, again and again. Each strike reverberated through her bones, dust filled her lungs, her arms ached. But she didn't stop. Liam sat close to the dog, whispering to it. Not in baby talk, but in full sentences, low and steady, like he was explaining something. He says he tried to save the others, but they caught him. He says he failed. Aubrey paused, mid-strike. "What others?" Liam didn't answer, just kept talking to the shepherd. After 20 minutes of relentless chipping, her hands trembling, she made the hole just wide enough for more of the dog's face to be visible. Its ears were crusted with blood. Its jaw hung slightly open, tongue swollen from dehydration. But its eyes, those haunting amber eyes, locked on Liam's and didn't waver. Aubrey dropped the tool, gasping. "We're going to get you out. Just hold on." The shepherd made a low sound. Not quite a whine, not a growl either. Something between. "He trusts you," Liam said. "He says thank you." "Wait, what?" Aubrey asked. But Liam had already moved closer. He touched the dog's muzzle with 2 fingers. The animal didn't flinch. "He has a name," Liam whispered. "It's not the one the bad men gave him. It's the one he remembers. He paused, smiled faintly. "His name is Hero." And at that moment the shepherd closed his eyes. But not like giving up. Like surrendering. To safety. To trust. To a boy who somehow heard him before anyone else did. Aubrey's fingers were numb, blistered and red. The skin under her nails raw from scraping at the concrete. Her multi-tool lay cracked in 2 on the ground, and all she had left was a broken metal tent peg she'd found nearby. It was barely sharp enough to peel paint, let alone chip through cement. But she kept going. 1 chip at a time. 1 flake of grey dust after another. Beside her, Liam never moved. The little boy sat cross-legged in the dirt, not saying a word now, his eyes locked on the German shepherd's face. That single amber eye blinked slowly at him, weak but aware, like the dog wasn't fully there, but wasn't ready to let go either. "He's trying to remember something," Liam finally whispered. Aubrey wiped her forehead with the back of her wrist, panting. "What do you mean, honey?" The boy tilted his head. "Not just where he is, who he is." Aubrey looked at him startled. "Did he tell you that?" Liam nodded without looking away from the wall. He forgot who he was, for a long time. But he remembers a little now. Something about the way Liam said it, quiet, sure, not dramatic, sent a cold ripple down her spine. He wasn't pretending. He wasn't imagining. He believed this. And Aubrey was starting to believe him, too. The dog shifted, barely. A quiet groan rumbled from somewhere inside the wall. The cement around his snout cracked just a little more, revealing a slice of muzzle, crusted with dried blood, flecks of ash, and something else. Paint? Number burn residue. Aubrey glanced at her phone. Still no signal. The emergency line had cut out after she made that first call. Probably the ridge. Or worse, no coverage out here at all. Where the hell was animal control? "We're wasting time," she muttered. She looked at Liam. "We need help. I need to get something stronger. Maybe find a crowbar or—" "No." His voice was so firm, it stopped her cold. She turned. Liam didn't look like a child just then. His jaw was set. His hand rested gently on the dog's snout, barely touching it, and yet the shepherd calmed the moment his skin made contact. "If you leave now," Liam said, "he'll give up." "How do you know that?" "Because I would," he said quietly, "if it were me in there." Aubrey felt her chest tighten. She knelt beside him, putting a hand on his shoulder. "I'm not leaving, I just—" She sighed, looking down at her ruined hands. "I don't know what else to do." Liam looked up at her. "You're doing it. Just don't stop." It wasn't just encouragement, it was instruction. So she kept digging. Minutes passed, maybe an hour. She lost track. Her arms ached so badly she thought she might throw up. But then, a large crack split through the concrete. Not much, just a fracture. But enough. She pried at it with the broken tent peg. Then again. With a dull crunch, a whole slab crumbled outward. And suddenly, a thick layer of insulation and debris came loose, falling into her lap. And there it was, the shepherd's shoulders, wedged in tight, covered in burn marks, patches of bare skin where fur had melted away. His legs were still trapped inside the wall, but now his chest was visible. And he was breathing. Shallow, but breathing. "Oh my God," she whispered. He was alive. Fully, terrifyingly alive. She didn't even realize she was crying until Liam touched her hand. "He said thank you," the boy said. "He said you didn't forget him, even if everyone else did." Aubrey blinked through her tears. "Who forgot him?" Liam didn't answer. Instead, he looked at the dog and whispered, "You're not lost anymore, Shadow." Aubrey's heart dropped. "Shadow?" The boy nodded. "That's his name. He remembers now." A chill crept through her body. "Liam, how do you know that?" "He told me." Aubrey stared at her son, but he was already busy talking to Shadow again, stroking his muzzle softly, whispering something too low for her to hear. Suddenly, a noise echoed from the tree line. Gravel crunching. A vehicle. A white van pulled into view, rusted at the edges, no markings. Two men in nondescript work clothes stepped out. One of them held a long, thick pry bar. The other carried what looked like a tranquilizer gun. "Animal control," the man with the gun called. Aubrey rose slowly, brushing her jeans. "You're with the county." The man gave a tight nod. "Dispatch sent us. Got a report of a trapped animal." His partner moved fast, too fast. Already inspecting the hole in the wall, reaching toward the shepherd without hesitation. "Whoa," Aubrey said, stepping between him and the dog. "Don't touch him like that. He's injured. He's scared. You could—" "We know what we're doing, ma'am," the man snapped. The other one moved to circle them. Shadow growled, low and guttural. Not in fear, in warning. Liam stood. "They're not from animal control?" The men froze. "What did you say, kid?" Liam didn't flinch. "You're the ones who put him in there." For a second, silence. Then one of the men lunged. But Shadow, half buried, half dead, surged forward with a roar so fierce and sudden it echoed off the trees like thunder. The concrete cracked louder. The slab shifted. Aubrey threw herself over Liam as the man stumbled back, tripping over the broken foundation. Shadow didn't bite. He just stared, eyes burning with memory. The men bolted. The van peeled off so fast it threw gravel into the air. Aubrey lay frozen for a moment, shielding her son, her breath caught. Then slowly, she looked up. Shadow's head had fallen forward, exhausted, but still alert, still alive. And for the first time, he let out a sound. A low, rough bark. Liam smiled. "He's not just a dog," he whispered. Aubrey nodded, brushing her son's hair back. "No, baby, he's not." Shadow had been hidden, forgotten, buried alive. but not anymore. The fluorescent lights inside Pine Ridge Animal Clinic hummed low and steady, but Aubrey's heart beat loud enough to drown them out. Her hands trembled as she held Liam close, sitting stiffly in the corner of the exam room. On the steel table lay the German shepherd they had pulled from the wall just hours ago. He was no longer encased in concrete, but in silence. The silence of things that have survived too much. Dr. Lila Bennett moved with the efficiency of someone used to trauma, but her movements were gentle, methodical. She was in her late 30s, blonde curls tied back, her scrubs streaked with blood, ash, and whatever other horrors Shadow had carried out of that wall. "He's sedated," she said without looking up. "Only lightly. Enough for the pain. I didn't want to knock him out completely, not yet." "Will he make it?" Aubrey asked. The vet paused, glancing at her. "I don't know," she admitted. "He's not just injured, he's dismantled, piece by piece." Aubrey swallowed hard. Dr. Bennett returned to her work, inspecting the rows of scar tissue along Shadow's flank. Some old, some horrifyingly fresh. "I've treated abused animals, starved, burned, cut. But this..." She traced a line near the base of his spine with her gloved finger. "This was done with precision. Like surgery. Like torture," she said flatly. Liam stirred beside his mother, eyes locked on Shadow. The dog was motionless except for the rhythmic rise and fall of his chest, but his ears flicked once when Liam shifted. He knew. He wasn't always a dog. Liam whispered. Aubrey blinked. "What?" "I mean, he was, but not like other dogs. He had another job, one with rules and people, and something went wrong." Dr. Bennett's hands froze mid-suture. She turned slowly. "How would he know that?" Aubrey hesitated. "He just does. He's always been sensitive. He connects with animals." The vet studied Liam for a moment, then turned back to the table. "Then maybe he's not wrong," she said, "because I found something." She moved to a small tray of instruments and picked up a sealed bag. Inside it was a small glass vial holding a metallic fragment no bigger than a grain of rice. "What is it?" Aubrey asked. "Microchip," Dr. Bennett said, "but not the kind we use for pets." She walked to the screen on the wall, inserted the vial into a reader, and brought up the scan. "This chip has encryption software I've never seen on civilian tech. It pinged something during my initial scan, very briefly, before going dark. That's why I had to extract it. It's not responding now. But this?" She tapped the screen. "This is military grade." Aubrey leaned in. The screen displayed a faint serial number, barely visible beneath layers of distortion. "Can you trace it?" "No," the vet said bluntly. "I tried connecting to the National Veterinary Database. Nothing. It's not listed, not even under working K-9 programs." "Then where did it come from?" Dr. Bennett turned, arms crossed, expression tightening. "That's the problem. I don't know. But based on the injuries, the restraint points burned into his legs, the missing toenails, the cranial bruising, it's clear he was held somewhere and subjected to repeated conditioning. And someone didn't want him found. Why bury him in a wall?" Aubrey whispered. "Maybe he escaped. Maybe they were trying to erase evidence. Or maybe..." She glanced at Liam, then back. "They were afraid of what he remembers." A silence stretched between them, heavy, thick. Aubrey sat down slowly, running a hand through her hair. "We called for help when we found him. Someone sent those men in a van. They didn't even have badges. One of them tried to tranquilize him." "They weren't from animal control," Dr. Bennett said. "That's clear." She turned and pulled the blinds shut, then locked the door. "I need you to do something," she said, her voice lower now. "Don't post photos. Don't call the news. Don't even tell your neighbors. Whatever happened to this dog, it wasn't meant to be public." Aubrey's pulse quickened. "Are we in danger?" "I don't know yet, but if someone's looking for him, and if they're willing to put him in a wall to keep him hidden, then yes, you might be." Liam rose from his seat, walking quietly to Shadow's side. He placed a small hand on the dog's bandaged paw. "He doesn't remember his last name," the boy said softly. "But he remembers pain, and someone who sang to him in Spanish." Dr. Bennett blinked. "What did you say?" Liam didn't answer. Shadow shifted beneath the sedation, just slightly. But it was enough. He was listening. The vet stepped closer, carefully examining his collarbone. "There's an old scar here. Looks surgical. Maybe a removed tracker. There could have been more than one device." Aubrey asked, "Can we report this to someone?" "Not yet," Bennett said. "We need to keep him here, under wraps, until I can stabilize him. You can stay if you want, but if anyone shows up asking questions, you don't know anything." Aubrey looked down at her son, his hand still on Shadow's paw. "I know more than I should already," she said. That night, they stayed in the clinic's back room, curled up on a worn couch. Outside, the parking lot sat quiet under a dull orange street lamp. Nothing moved, but somewhere far from there, a computer terminal blinked on. A signal, faint, encrypted and old, had just been detected for the first time in 3 years. And someone on the other end wasn't happy it had come back online. The clinic was quiet except for the low beeping of a heart monitor and the distant hum of an aging air vent. Dr. Bennett had gone, home to rest for a few hours, leaving Aubrey and Liam tucked away in the small recovery room next to Shadow's enclosure. Outside, the world slept, unaware of the war that was still breathing softly behind a locked glass door. Aubrey lay curled on a stiff cot, but sleep never came. Her ears tracked every noise, the subtle shift of Shadow's paws on the bedding, Liam's occasional murmurs in his sleep, the groan of the old building settling into its foundation. Then, without warning, Liam sat up. His eyes were wide, his breath shallow, as if he'd surfaced too quickly from a nightmare. Aubrey bolted upright. "Sweetheart," she whispered. "What is it?" Liam didn't speak. He simply reached for the crumpled sketch pad he'd brought from home. His hands moved fast, frantic almost, pencil scratching against the paper like it had a life of its own. Aubrey watched, heart climbing into her throat. He finished the drawing in less than 5 minutes. When he turned the pad toward her, she couldn't breathe. The image was crude, but disturbingly clear. A dimly lit room, underground by the look of it. Thick metal walls. Small beds, cages really, lined the sides. Inside each one a child, curled tight like a question mark. And in the center stood Shadow, back arched protectively, teeth bared, facing something unseen beyond the frame. "Liam, what is this?" The boy's voice was steady but distant. That's where he came from. Aubrey stared. "He protected us," Liam said. "He kept the bad man from taking us away. But then they took him. They put him behind the wall so no one would know." Tears welled in his eyes, but he didn't blink. They were afraid of what he remembered. Aubrey's chest tightened. She wanted to brush it off as imagination. A child's way of processing trauma. But there was something in Liam's voice, too calm, too knowing, that made her skin crawl. She gently placed a hand on his back. "Did someone tell you this?" "No," he said. "He did." Before she could respond, a soft whine drifted from the other side of the wall. Aubrey looked towards the glass where Shadow lay. The dog's eyes were open, watching them. She stood, slowly. Shadow didn't move, but his gaze was locked on Liam. Not just recognition, but understanding. It was the look of a soldier who'd just heard the name of a lost comrade spoken out loud. And then something shifted in Aubrey. The mother in her, the fierce, unshakable part, began to piece it together. The men in the unmarked van, the military-grade chip, the torture marks, and now Liam's visions, which came not as dreams, but as memories passed between species, like a secret language. This wasn't just about an abused dog. This was bigger. She stepped into the hall, phone in hand, and dialed Doctor. Bennett. Lila, it's me. We need to talk. A pause. Groggy voice. Is something wrong? Aubrey's voice dropped to a whisper. My son just drew something. A room with children in cages. He said Shadow saved them, and they buried him for it. Static on the line. Then, I'll be there in 20 minutes. She hung up and turned to Liam. He was now sitting beside Shadow's glass enclosure, one small hand pressed to the pane. Shadow, despite his pain and the sedation still lingering in his system, pressed his nose gently against the glass from the other side. He wants to go back, Liam whispered. Aubrey crouched beside him. Go back where? Liam didn't answer. Instead, he looked up at her with a strange mix of calm and sadness. Mama, I think he left something behind. Someone. Outside, the wind began to rise, rustling the trees. A car engine echoed faintly in the distance, followed by silence. Then the clinic's front door creaked. Aubrey froze. No one was supposed to come until morning. She grabbed Liam's hand and pulled him behind her, retreating into the corner of the hallway. Footsteps, quiet and deliberate, moved past the reception desk. Shadows danced on the far wall. Then a voice, low, unfamiliar, called softly. Dr. Bennett? No response. The steps grew closer. Aubrey slipped her phone into her back pocket, grabbed the small fire extinguisher from the wall, and waited. The figure that appeared in the doorway wasn't Dr. Bennett. It was a man in plain black clothes, carrying a small silver case. He looked around, scanning the room like he was expecting it to be empty. When his eyes landed on the recovery glass, and on Shadow, they narrowed. He raised the case. Aubrey stepped forward without thinking. Hey, what are you doing here? The man stiffened, startled. I'm with Emergency Veterinary Response. I'm here to— No, you're not, Aubrey said. We didn't call for anyone. The man's smile was thin, calculated. It's protocol. We got a flagged signal from a K9 tracker. You mean the one Dr. Bennett removed hours ago? Silence. Then, subtly, he shifted his stance toward the enclosure. Step away, Aubrey said, raising the extinguisher. Behind her, Liam clutched her shirt. Mom, I suggest you calm down, the man said. But he never got to finish his threat, because the recovery door behind him opened and Dr. Bennett stepped inside, holding a stun gun. I suggest you do the same, she said. The man turned and froze. I called a contact in the army, she said. That chip doesn't exist on any official record, which means whatever program you're part of isn't supposed to exist either. He didn't speak, just turned and walked slowly to the door. This isn't over, he muttered. I hope not, Bennett replied. As the door shut behind him, Aubrey turned to Liam, who looked back at Shadow. Shadow was sitting up now, barely, his breathing labored, but his eyes calm. You okay, bud? Aubrey asked. Liam nodded, but didn't look at her. Mum? Yeah. What happens if they come back? And they don't knock first? The question lingered, heavy. And in the quiet that followed, Shadow closed his eyes. Not in fear, but in a kind of acceptance. He knew they were coming, and this time he wouldn't be the one running. It started with a vibration, then another. Aubrey glanced at her phone in the middle of Liam's math worksheet, expecting a harmless calendar alert. Instead, the message froze her spine. From Dr. Lila Bennett, subject, urgent text. They're looking for Shadow. Not the good kind. Get out. I'm deleting this number. She stared, reread it twice. Her fingers clenched around the phone. Liam, she said, her voice low and urgent. Pack your sketchbook and warm clothes. Now. The boy blinked. Where are we going? I'll explain in the car. Move. In less than 5 minutes, she had Shadow's leash clipped, a duffel bag zipped, and Liam buckled into the back seat with his backpack hugged to his chest. Shadow sat beside him, head lowered but ears alert, like he already sensed what was coming. Aubrey drove without music. No headlights at first, just the faint orange glow of distant street lamps disappearing in the rear view. The night pressed in like a weight, thick and watchful. She pulled over 2 towns away and checked the other message Lila had left. Not a text, just an encrypted file on a thumb drive that had been duct-taped to the bottom of the vet's desk. Inside were scanned images, scribbled notes, a rough hand-drawn map, and one name scrawled in red ink. Nate Calloway. Aubrey frowned. The name felt familiar. She kept reading. Nate Calloway. Investigative journalist, ex-military, specialized in deep-cover trafficking exposés, missing since last spring, presumed dead. Last known GPS ping. A cabin north of Mount Langston, deep inside protected forestry land. No access roads, no power grid, just a blue X on the edge of nowhere. Taped to the final page was a sticky note in Lila's handwriting. He was chasing the same ghost we are. If he's alive, he knows what Shadow is. If not, maybe his notes will. Shadow let out a low growl. Aubrey's eyes darted to the rear view. Not at Shadow. Behind them. Headlights. 2. Black SUV. No license plate. No high beams. It wasn't speeding. Just following. Uncomfortably close. She turned sharply down a narrow gravel road. The SUV followed. Then another joined from the parallel ridge above. Her hands tightened on the wheel. Mom! Liam's voice was barely audible. Aubrey didn't answer. She cut the lights, veered into a side trail that wasn't on any GPS. The car jolted, dirt and branches scraping the undercarriage. She killed the engine. Silence. The SUVs didn't follow. Shadow growled again, deeper now, protective, almost tactical. She looked back. His posture had changed. He wasn't afraid, he was waiting. They sat in the dark for several long minutes. Liam buried his face in Shadow's fur. The dog didn't flinch, didn't move, just stared into the trees like he was watching an old enemy draw breath again. Eventually, the lights disappeared. Aubrey restarted the car, but her breath was uneven now. She didn't drive home. She didn't drive anywhere with cameras. She followed the map. The cabin wasn't a cabin. From the outside, it looked like a crumbling ranger's station long abandoned. The siding was warped, the chimney broken, windows crusted with moss and time. But inside, it told a different story. Aubrey pried open the front door. Dust exploded in her face. The air reeked of old paper, mildew, and the faint acidic bite of battery acid. She flipped a breaker. Nothing. Shadow walked ahead like he'd been there before. In the center of the room sat a map of the state, pinned to the floor with rusted nails. Dozens of locations circled. Some crossed out, others labeled in shorthand. Transit Point 3A. Cold Room. Witness 9. In the back room was a cot, a cold plate burner, and shelves lined with waterproof notebooks. Most of them marked NC, Nate Calloway. Liam picked up a photo half tucked beneath a book. A younger Nate standing with 2 K9 units, one of them resembling Shadow. Aubrey felt the weight of it settle on her chest. What happened here? She whispered. She didn't have to wonder long. There was a rustle behind them. Shadow shot up, teeth bared. Aubrey grabbed the closest object, a metal flashlight, and turned slowly. A man stood in the doorway, one eye bruised, a makeshift bandage over his forearm. He raised both hands, unarmed. "Easy," he said hoarsely. "You must be Aubrey." Shadow didn't lunge, but didn't relax either. "Nate Calloway," the man added, lowering his hands. Aubrey blinked. "You're supposed to be dead." "Not yet," he said, "but if they tracked you here, we all will be soon." He moved toward the corner and pressed something behind a shelf. A soft click. A trapdoor opened under the rug. "They're not just coming for the dog," Nate said. "They're coming for everything he remembers." Aubrey looked at Liam, then back at Shadow, who, for the first time in hours, wagged his tail faintly. Not because he was safe, because the mission wasn't over, not even close. The morning mist hadn't yet lifted when Shadow stiffened at the edge of the trail. They had been walking for nearly 3 hours, cutting through overgrown switchbacks and ravines behind Nate's cabin. But Shadow moved with uncanny purpose, nose low, tail steady, pausing only when the air shifted or when the silence grew unnaturally still. "He knows where we're going," Liam whispered, watching Shadow's ears flick forward like twin radar dishes. Aubrey nodded, but she wasn't so sure it was just memory. There was something in the dog's movement, something beyond scent, beyond training. Shadow didn't just follow trails, he read the terrain like it spoke to him, like danger hummed in frequencies only he could hear. And today, it was getting louder. They reached a rusted chain-link fence, barely standing between a collapsed storage shed and a bunker-like cabin carved into the slope. This one wasn't on Nate's map. No power lines, no chimney, no mailbox, just reinforced walls, a vent shaft, and silence. Shadow sat at the door, paw raised. "He's saying this is it," Liam said. Aubrey raised an eyebrow. "You're sure?" Liam simply nodded. "He showed me things in dreams, and this was one of them." Aubrey hesitated. She'd stopped questioning the connection between Liam and the dog days ago. There were too many moments she couldn't explain, like when Shadow paced 5 minutes before the black SUV appeared, or when he refused to enter a room right before the propane line burst. She reached for the door. Locked. Nate stepped forward. "Let me." He slid a small magnet across the frame. A faint click. Inside, dust curled in the light, but the air didn't smell abandoned. It smelled filtered, like someone had been here recently, or still was. They moved cautiously. The back room held what looked like an old server rack wired into solar inverters. Dead screens lined one wall, except for a single laptop glowing with faint blue light on a metal table. It wasn't password protected. Files were already open. One folder, Echolink Project, Final Phase. Aubrey sat down slowly, scrolling. Videos, scans, neural diagrams, scenarios. They watched in silence as grainy footage played. Children in controlled rooms, outfitted with small neural caps. Beside each of them, a military-trained dog wearing a similar device. A command would come through a headset. Target red square. Non-lethal disable. The child blinked. The dog moved. No delay. No verbal cue. The dog acted as if it had read the child's thought before it formed. Perfect synchronization. Another video. Darker. This time, the command was whispered. Neutralize hostile. The child didn't speak, but the heart monitor spiked. The dog's pupils dilated. Seconds later, the figure in the footage, an adult in a lab coat, was tackled to the ground, throat locked between a dog's jaws. Liam gasped. Shadow stepped forward, growling at the screen. Aubrey scrolled to the reports. All children were trauma survivors, selected from shelters, refugee zones, disaster sites, places no one would ask too many questions. Dogs were K9 dropouts, war-traumatized or failed service animals, until Echolink. Together they formed neural bonds triggered by emotion, instinct, and fear. They turned trauma into a weapon. Nate muttered. Aubrey kept reading. One name repeated. Dr. Alan Voss, lead developer, formerly with a government think tank, now funded by a private firm called Trovax Industries. Nate opened another folder labeled Failures. Inside were redacted files, disappeared children, dogs terminated for instability. One ID flashed, across the screen. Shadows. His file was marked for termination. Not because he failed, because he resisted. He had broken the Echolink tether in mid-mission and attacked a commanding officer who gave the kill signal too early. Shadow wasn't just a survivor. He was a defector. That's why they wanted him silenced. Suddenly, a small light blinked at the corner of the screen. Aubrey's hand froze. Nate leaned over. Someone just accessed the mainframe remotely. The screen went black. They heard it next. An engine, then another. Outside, 3 black ATVs pulled up, tires hissing on wet earth. Back exit, Nate said, already grabbing the laptop. They found us. Shadow didn't wait for the command. He pushed through the hall toward a loose panel and nosed it open. Liam followed without hesitation. As they crawled through the vent shaft, Aubrey glanced back. A shadow passed in front of the window, helmeted, armed, sweeping the room with a green laser. She gritted her teeth and kept moving. They emerged half a mile down the hill, breathless and covered in dirt. Shadow spun in circles, then locked eyes with Nate. Nate nodded. He knows where to go. Aubrey pulled Liam close. You okay? Liam nodded slowly. Mom, Echolink didn't just connect dogs and kids. It made us feel the same. Shadow knew when I was scared. I knew when he was angry. It's like he's inside me, but not in a bad way. Aubrey swallowed hard. Nate held up the laptop. This ends with Voss. And if we find him? She asked. Then we make sure Echolink never happens again. Shadow barked once, low, fierce, certain. And then he took off down the path like he already knew the way. The woods fell silent in a way that didn't feel natural. Shadow halted mid-stride on the game trail, ears rigid, his entire body turned into a taut wire. Liam stopped beside him, his hand resting gently on the dog's back. Even his breath stilled. He didn't need words to know something was wrong. He could feel it, like a tremor inside his chest that wasn't his own. Aubrey crouched behind a fallen log, scanning the trees. Talk to me, she whispered. Nate was beside her, sweat sliding down the back of his neck despite the chill. He was typing furiously into the laptop, tethered to a signal booster cobbled together from an old ham radio and solar battery. I found the original lab logs, he said, voice tight. Shadow wasn't just a test subject. He was the subject, the first dog to form a stable neural link with a human child, and the only one to ever break it on his own. Aubrey frowned. Break it. Sever the bond. The neural sync isn't just data, it's emotional. Dogs take on the trauma of their partner. Most of them go unstable, but Shadow, he absorbed it, protected his human, and then he ran. Liam looked up. That's why they're after him? Nate nodded. He's the anomaly. The only Echolink subject who didn't obey, didn't collapse, and didn't kill his handler. They called him the ghost asset. A rustle. Too loud. Too close. Shadow snarled low. Move! Aubrey hissed. Gunfire cracked through the trees. They ran. The mercenaries were fast, trained, no warning shots, just containment. Nate clutched the laptop to his chest, ducking between trees. Aubrey had her hand around Liam's collar, half dragging, half pulling, while Shadow flanked the boy's other side, snarling every few steps. A bullet slammed into a pine beside them, sending bark and sap flying. "Keep going!" Nate shouted. "Ravines ahead!" They dove into the drop just as another burst of rounds tore through the ferns where they'd stood. They landed hard. Liam's elbow hit a rock. Aubrey's shoulder wrenched, but Shadow stayed on his feet, already turning back, lips peeled. One of the mercs dropped into the ravine behind them, silent, helmeted, rifle raised. Shadow leapt. The man never even saw him coming. One moment he stood tall, the next he was on his back, weapon spinning into the brush, throat beneath 2 rows of gleaming white teeth. But Shadow didn't kill. He clamped just long enough to make a point, then released and bounded back to Liam's side. "Shadow!" Liam cried, arms wrapping around the dog's neck. "You're not going anywhere again. Not without me." They kept moving. By nightfall, they reached a crumbling ranger station long since abandoned. The floor creaked under them, but it was shelter. Aubrey barred the door with a table. Nate collapsed into a dusty chair, finally able to breathe. He opened the laptop again. More files. Deeper. Shadow's full profile was there now, unredacted. Name, K9014. Shadow Handler, Elijah Rames, deceased. Final link target, Liam Bennett. Aubrey froze. "What does that mean?" Nate swallowed hard. Liam wasn't just a random connection, he was the fallback. If Shadow ever broke protocol, he was programmed to seek out the strongest emotional echo from his first handler's memory. That was Liam. Liam stared at the screen. "But I never met him before." "No." Nate said, "But your father did." Silence fell like a heavy curtain. Aubrey's hands clenched the table. "My husband, he was military. And his last mission," Nate added, "was guarding the Echolink prototype site. The same site where Shadow was born." It made sick, terrible sense. The night Shadow appeared at their house, bleeding and shaking, wasn't random. He came home, to them, to Liam. "Your husband was listed as KIA, but I think that was a cover. I think he was collateral. When Shadow defected, they burned the site. No witnesses." Aubrey looked at the dog. Shadow stared back, eyes ancient and glassy with something close to sorrow. It wasn't just protection, it was guilt. A branch snapped outside. Shadow stood instantly, nose twitching. "They're back," Liam whispered. No time. They fled through the back window, racing into the night as the mercenaries closed in. This time, they were prepared. The men weren't just soldiers, they were asset retrieval. Trained not to question orders, not to spare lives. Their goal was simple: retrieve the ghost asset at any cost. But Shadow wasn't just an asset anymore, he was a survivor, a defector. And now, a guardian. As they slipped through the dark underbrush, chased by ghosts from a past they never knew, the truth settled over them like a second skin. This wasn't just about a dog, or a child, or a long-buried experiment. This was a war for control of innocence, and Shadow was the proof that it could be broken. Behind them, the forest lit with green scopes and hushed voices. But ahead, Shadow never slowed. Every step he took was deliberate. Every pause, every glance, carried the weight of something more than instinct. He wasn't running anymore. He was leading them somewhere, to someone, to the one person who could end this. Because sometimes the most dangerous secret isn't the weapon, it's the one who refused to use it. The night clung to the forest like wet wool, heavy, damp, suffocating. Aubrey's breath came in ragged bursts as she crouched behind the boulder, cradling Liam tightly against her chest. Nate was on the far side of the brush, hunched over the laptop with trembling fingers, the satellite uplink barely holding its signal. The file transfer bar inched forward, agonizingly slow. Shadow stood just a few feet away, head high, body still. His ears flicked at the slightest sound. twigs snapping under boots, static from walkie-talkies, the soft click of rifles being primed. "They're surrounding us," Aubrey whispered, eyes darting. "We're not getting out of this in one piece." Liam shook his head, his cheeks streaked with tears and mud. "Number Shadow will protect us. He always does." As if hearing his name, Shadow turned, locking eyes with the boy. Then he moved, not toward them, but away. "Aubrey," Nate said urgently. "He's drawing them off." "No!" Liam broke from her grasp and tried to follow. "Shadow, no, come back!" But the dog was already gone, a blur of muscle and motion weaving through the dark, his path deliberately loud, branches cracking, paws slamming against ground. A decoy. Liam screamed after him, voice breaking in a way that made something deep in Aubrey splinter. The gunfire started seconds later. Short bursts. Then silence. Then shouts. "They're splitting up," Nate said. "Taking the bait." Aubrey pulled Liam close again, whispering, "He's not leaving you. He's leading them away so you can finish what he started." Nate's voice trembled. "The files are almost sent. 1 more minute. Just 1 more." The screen flickered. Transfer complete. Encrypted backup sent. Recipient: Global Investigative Network. Nate exhaled like he hadn't in weeks. "It's out. Everything. Echo Link, the labs, the asset reports. They can't bury it now." A crash. A grunt. Then silence again. No more gunfire. No more footsteps. Just the wind returning to the trees like it had been holding its breath. "Where's Shadow?" Liam asked, voice shaking. Aubrey swallowed hard. "We don't know, baby. But he did what he had to." "I can't feel him," Liam said softly. "I always feel him in here." He pressed a hand to his chest. "Even when I close my eyes, it's like a warm hum. Now it's gone." Aubrey looked to Nate. His expression confirmed the worst. If the neural sync broke, it meant distance, or something worse. They waited through the longest hour of their lives, hiding in the hollow of a burned-out tree until the sounds of the mercenaries faded for good. The forest was eerily quiet. Nate tried to ping Shadow's tracker, but the signal was blank. No data, no location, like he'd vanished off the grid. They made it to the ridge by dawn. Below them, a forest access road curved around the base of the mountain. Nate flagged down a ranger truck, while Aubrey wrapped Liam in her coat, his small body shivering not from cold, but from something that went deeper. "Did they get him?" Liam asked again, his voice no louder than a breath. Nate didn't answer. Couldn't. But Aubrey did. Number Shadow's too smart for that. He's out there watching. He made a promise to protect you. And dogs like him, dogs like Shadow, they don't break promises. Liam didn't speak again until they were safe in the back of the truck, rumbling down the winding trail. Then, softly, through a cracked voice, he asked, "Will he find us again?" Aubrey didn't have a perfect answer. She just squeezed his hand and said, "If he's alive, he will." Far behind them, in a shallow ravine littered with spent shell casings and footprints, lay the torn scrap of a dog's tactical harness. It was soaked, not with blood, but with river water and thick mud. A false trail, a decoy right down to the last detail. And from the shadows of the trees, a pair of amber eyes watched the truck vanish down the road. Silent, still, waiting. A promise had been made, and Shadow was still keeping it. It started with a leak, not just a trickle, but a torrent. 3 weeks after the night in the woods, the story broke. First in niche military watchdog blogs, then on morning cable news, and by noon it was headlining every national network. Project Echo Link, a classified Department of Defense initiative exploring neurosynaptic pairing between trained military dogs and children labeled as emotionally adaptive candidates. The goal? Create a seamless bond, untraceable to surveillance and undetectable to enemies, where instinct and intelligence could be fused into a weapon no one would suspect. A child and a dog. The documents Nate had uploaded were real, and they were explosive. There were photos, redacted transcripts, briefings with titles like Behavioral, Malleability in Juvenile Subjects, and Canine Neural Mapping Protocols. Test sites scattered across abandoned airstrips and decommissioned bunkers. Children's names, first names only, linked to ID numbers and pairing codes. One of them simply read, LIAM072/SHDW11A. It should have been enough to shut everything down. But the real firestorm wasn't just the science, it was the silence. Families who had signed vague developmental training contracts for their kids. Parents who were told the dogs were therapy animals, volunteers who'd vanished. And names of generals, colonels, psychologists, biotech CEOs, all summoned to testify. On Capitol Hill, the hearings started in hushed tones behind closed doors. But the public wanted blood. Commentators asked how it had gone on so long, who had funded it, and, more than anything, how many children had been involved. Anchors stumbled over their words on live TV. Some cried. But amidst all the fury, one name never came up. Shadow. Not once. No mention in the documents. No profile photo. No biometric tag. His tracking implant had been erased from the server. His final mission logs were missing. To the government, to the press, even to the whistleblower networks digging through troves of classified dumps, Shadow didn't exist. A ghost. Maybe that's how he wanted it. Nate said, sitting across from Aubrey in the motel lobby in northern Vermont. His voice was low, the television buzzing behind them with yet another breaking update. He deserves more than silence. Aubrey replied. Her fingers clutched a photograph of Shadow taken during training, ears alert, eyes focused, sitting beside a 6-year-old Liam. He saved our lives, and no one will even say his name. Liam was asleep on the couch nearby, wrapped in a thick blanket. He hadn't spoken much in the past few days. He just kept his hand curled like he was holding on to something invisible, like the memory of a presence that still pulsed beside him. He's still not feeling the connection, Aubrey added quietly. He says the hum's gone, that little warm buzz in his chest. It used to help him sleep. Nate ran a hand through his overgrown beard. If Shadow severed it, it was to protect him. The sync worked both ways. If the agency traced Liam's end, he sacrificed his bond to keep Liam safe. She finished, voice cracking. They sat in silence for a while, listening to the news anchor list the names of high-ranking officials placed on administrative leave. No arrests yet. No apologies either. They're gonna bury this again, Aubrey whispered. Not this time, Nate said, pulling out his phone. There are still more files, stuff I didn't even get to decrypt yet, and I have contacts at The Guardian, the kind who don't scare easily. But Aubrey didn't look reassured. What if that's not enough? She asked. What if they erase everything like they erased him? Nate didn't answer. Instead, he stood and walked to the window, pulling back the curtain. Snow was falling, soft and soundless, blanketing the world in quiet. Liam stirred and sat up, eyes fluttering open. He looked around the room, then slowly turned towards the window. He didn't say anything at first. Then, in a small voice, he whispered, I felt something. Aubrey's heart stopped. What do you mean? I don't know. It was just for a second, like someone was watching, but not in a bad way. He put his hand on his chest. It was warm, just for a blink. Aubrey knelt beside him, brushing his hair back. You think it was Shadow? Liam nodded slowly. I think he's not gone, he said. I think he's just hiding, waiting for the right time. Across the room, Nate's phone buzzed. He looked down at the screen. A message. No number. No metadata. Just 2 words. Still watching. His blood went cold. He turned to Aubrey. You didn't send this? She shook her head. He looked back at the screen. Then, for the first time in weeks, Nate Ellis smiled. Wherever Shadow was, whatever mission he had taken on, he was still out there. Untraceable, unseen, but watching and waiting. Because the story wasn't over. Not yet. 1 year later. The Vermont air was crisp with the smell of pine and late autumn leaves. At the center of the field stood a long white tent strung with simple lights, beneath which volunteers gathered with families, children, and dozens of rescued dogs, some still limping, some blind, all wearing new collars and tags that whispered of second chances. It was the annual Rescue Service Dog Adoption Day, sponsored anonymously by a donor whose name no one seemed to know. But the local papers called them the Shadow Patron, after the rumors of a military dog who had vanished into legend. Liam stood near the back of the crowd, hands tucked into his coat pockets. He'd grown taller, surer on his feet. The quiet buzz that used to hum in his chest was gone now, but he no longer cried at night. At least not often. Next to him was a dog, an older German shepherd with cloudy eyes and a worn gait. On his collar was a polished tag that read, Retired Service Dog, and just below it, a smaller one that read, Max, in blocky capital letters. Liam had helped train Max for a new family that couldn't make it to the ceremony. But Max never left his side. Across the field, Aubrey watched them from a table, smiling gently as Liam kneeled beside the shepherd and scratched behind his ears. Max wagged once, slow and steady, then rested his head on the boy's knee. Liam looked up. "Mom?" he called, his voice still young, but touched with something older, something thoughtful. Aubrey walked over and knelt beside him. "Yeah, baby?" He pointed to Max's badge, then looked up at her, eyes wide and honest. "If someone saved a bunch of kids," he said, "but no one ever called him a hero. Do you think that's fair?" Aubrey blinked. Liam wasn't asking about Max. He wasn't asking about medals or names in history books. He was asking about Shadow, the dog who had vanished, who had once made the ground hum with safety beneath his small hands, who had led them out of a dark forest and into a world still learning how to be kind. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she pulled Liam close and kissed the top of his head. Then she looked out over the field, the wagging tails, the quiet healers, the battered survivors now finding homes. "Sometimes," she said softly, "heroes don't need to be known. Sometimes they just need to be remembered." Liam nodded slowly, his hand resting on Max's back. High above them, a hawk traced lazy circles in the sky, and in the tree line beyond the field, for just a blink, something moved, low and silent, watching. But when they turned to look, there was nothing there. Only trees, only wind, only the echo of a story that had never really ended. Because maybe Shadow wasn't gone. Maybe he had become something more. Not a ghost, not a myth, but a promise. A legacy passed down from paw to paw, heart to heart. And sometimes, in the quiet moments when the world paused long enough to feel it, you could still sense him, just out of sight, watching, waiting, guiding, from a shadow. What's your story with a loyal pet? We invite you to share it in the comments, and if Shadow's journey moved you, consider subscribing and supporting our channel, German Shepherd. Every voice helps us tell the next untold story.